Anthropic just released another model. It's not a Mythos, unfortunately, but it is Opus 4.7. Now, it should be an exciting release. It's always exciting to get a new frontier model, but I want to take you through a few stages of grief that I went through while testing this model today. So first of all, let's take a look at what Anthropic is telling us here, is that if we look at the benchmark scores, especially for coding, we have big jumps. On hard benchmarks like SweetBench Pro, there's really big uplift, over 10 percentage points between Opus 4.6, which was already a really, really nice model. So you'd think if you're going to look at these sorts of benchmarks, you're going to feel really big difference straight away in real-world performance. Now, the kind of tests we are going to do, all done on the Arena, and the way it works for us here is that we can put in a prompt and we get a one-shot generation. Now, I know what you're going to say. I know it's not doing everything. It doesn't go through your code base. It doesn't do a lot of, testing, debugging, and so on. And that's all fair enough. You're going to have different performance if you test it on your code base. But the reason why we want to do it like this is that we can have very nice side-by-side comparison between different models, because we all use consistent hardness. We all do it one shot. We don't do lots of iterations. And the reason why I like 3D prompts is that it allows us to have this really nice feel for how does the model understand complex instructions. And you can see here instructions quite complex. How does it understand the real world? How can it coordinate different elements? So that's what I really want to test and show you so we can look at it together. So the way it's going to go is that we've got 100 tests. We'll see if we're going to get through them in time. And we've got 16 prompts and a bunch of different models here. So what I want to do is to just show you and see what you think. And really, I think that's the only way, is for you to look at it yourself and see what you think, and you can disagree with me on some of the ideas. So this is Opus 4.6, and you can see the model name here in the top left corner. So Opus 4.7 rather, and what this is meant to be showing is Cappadocia, where we've got the different balloons and so on. So this is the idea behind it. So it's a decent generation, and you look at it, it's like, okay, that's not too bad. Then there's another Opus 4.7 generation, and you look at it, it's like, what the hell happened here? So we're clearly missing the actual balloons, and just half of the things are missing that you expect. So, and this is like, you think, okay, one-off, things happen. That's pretty normal. But this is genuinely like one of the worst generations that I've seen. If you look at Opus 4.6, so there's the previous generation model, like really nice, very interesting. Balloons a bit weird, but it's quite good. We get GPT 5.4 high here. Really, really nice generation. The balloon's really nice shaped. We've got like all the details here. So that's really nice one in here. Even if we look at Sonnet 4.6 here, again, it's like, even like, okay, fair enough. If you look at this one, maybe something went wrong here, clearly. But even between Opus 4.7 here and so Opus 4.7 and Sonnet 4.6, I'm not entirely sure that Opus 4.7 wins here entirely. Not super clear to me. And even if we look at some of the others, like GLM model, which is a really nice model, but you normally look at it and you'd say, okay, these are nice models, but they're nowhere near strong. But if you look at GLM 5, GLM 5.1 in here, you can see that they're not necessarily much worse than some of the generations that we've seen. And Google does pretty well on these sorts of tests, although one thing I would say is that Google's models have been quite inconsistent, and you can see between like a couple of generations here, and you will see it later as well, is that Google's models seem to be like really good sometimes, and sometimes they just kind of flip out. And I wonder if it's something to do with the level of thinking and just like how much thinking that it does. But let's keep looking together. So we've got here, this is voxel simulation Opus 4.7, then Opus 4.6. So I would actually say 4.7 here is better. That's, I think, is fair. So it's kind of more built up and so on. So I would prefer that. Another Opus 4.6, a different take, but yeah, I would still say Opus 4.7 is better. I would prefer Gemini 3.1 Pro here, personally, but it's kind of debatable. And in here, this is JLM5. So again, I don't know if it would win, but certainly not that far behind. And especially if you think back to the benchmark scores that we are looking at, it's certainly not clear how is it that a model that wins by so much versus, let's say, GPT 5.4 on these benchmarks, and or for example, Gemini 3.1 Pro is not like that obviously better at these sorts of tests. Now, you might say, it's reasonable, you don't care about these tests. That's okay, but still, if you look at things like that, so this is the Golden Gate Bridge, you would expect a really smart model to understand that, you shouldn't be putting a bridge like that, right? So there's definitely a lot of issues with this. And the bridge itself is fine, but like, it doesn't really make sense. There are a lot of issues with this. And this is kind of an issue, I guess, we had. This is Opus 4.5, still kind of doing that weird stuff. So I guess it got better, but that's still not great. If you look at Gemini 3.1 here, I think it's not quite as interesting, but it's much more accurate the way it works here. A couple more Gemini generations there. I do find it kind of curious how kind of not obviously better it is, we'll see some more examples where it's like clearly even worse. We saw it at the beginning. I think it was pretty clearly worse, and I think there are some more examples where it is worse. Even here, so this is Sonnet 4.6, right? Remember, and this is Opus 4.7. Now, I would kind of give an edge here to Sonnet, right? I think it is better. It is kind of more interesting, more detailed. If we look at some others, actually, 5.4 here isn't better. But if we keep flicking through, actually, what? I think Sonnet's one was probably the best here. So maybe on this kind of test, it was kind of maybe a bit of a hope, kind of an improvement, but not that much. But I want to show you this one. So this is a pretty good generation, like decent generation from 5.4. I have seen better. And the idea here is that it's supposed to show the coral reef. And with the kind of a lot of detail, different fish and so on. But the coral reef is pretty important part of it. And if we see generation from 4.7, it did interesting fish, that was quite nice, but no, obviously it's missing any ground. And that kind of thing is just, it kind of gives you pauses, like what's going on there? I don't remember that kind of thing happening with Opus 4.6. Like maybe 4.7 did more interesting fish, but it's certainly, even if we imagine that there's like some kind of flaw here, it would be like completely flat, I guess. So I think here is much more interesting, much more detail. And this is like even Opus 4.5, right? They kind of given more details here. And this is Sonnet 4.6, right? So I think Sonnet here is like really, really nice. So again, we have this kind of jumps between the different benchmarks, and then you run these kinds of tests that are not the hardest thing in the world, and they don't perform that well. And here we've got JLM 5.1. It's an open source model. I remind you, it will be really cheap to run, and it's really like quite a nice generation. Certainly better than Opus 4.7, which seems to be really quite expensive, with some changes that they did to tokenization and so on. And by the way, when I did run one of my tests in the UI in the web app, I've got like the $20 pro subscription, and literally did not finish one prompt, and I ran out of, I hit the limit there, which was quite funny, I must say. Yeah, this one is a bit of a shame. This one could be really good generation. I find it hard, like I'm not being an idiot here, I just can't quite control it here, but I thought that was an interesting generation. It looked like it did something different versus others, and I think from what I could tell, the accuracy is like pretty decent versus some of the others here. So if we look at the Sonnet one, yeah, that's pretty weird what it has done. If you look at GPT 5.4 High, again, not like the best generation, I must say. But we have seen some nice ones. So this is a different take, and this is not accurate at all, but there's certain, like the open source models like MK2 are certainly not completely terrible at these kind of generations. So yeah, I think this one is sort of interesting, what they did there. Would be interesting to kind of see and dig in, because it does feel quite different. So that one kind of gives me a positive pause that maybe it is doing something good there. So let's keep looking at a few more. Yeah, maybe let me find some interesting ones. I know I said we have 100 tests, but I think let's not make this video 45 minutes. So I'll just give you some more interesting ones. So this one is showing this interesting generation, which I quite like, because it does it's quite a beautiful scenery that you can create with it. And I must say, let's look at the others. Maybe that's a decent view. If we'll compare it to some of the others, I think it is like a little bit disappointing. Although here's like, that's one thing I'm thinking about the Gemini models. There's something that feels about them that is like a little bit now similar to the Opus models, where they seem to be really unstable. And maybe it's something to do with how much effort is spent on different things, but you kind of go between these really impressive generations, like maybe we almost had with the generation of Stonehenge, and then we have some which like really completely flip out. So in here, for example, this is the Opus 4.6 thinking, and I personally think that this is a better generation than Opus 4.7. Right? I think it has higher level of detail. There's another Opus 4.6. So again, to me, that feels better than 4.7. So high level of detail, it really looks like very thought through. It was quite an impressive one, but 4.7 feels worse to me. And if we go between, that's another thing you notice, is that you kind of go between 4.5 to 4.6 to 4.7, or sometimes even Sonnet, and it's not super clear, right, which one is actually better. Like if you were to do a blind test, like you can do on Arena, like you'd probably, I'm guessing you'd pick 4.7 more, but it's not like completely obvious that it is better. And we've got a few more generations. So hopefully you're kind of getting the picture of the kind of generations we're getting. And maybe I want to close on this one. And I'm going to go kind of backwards maybe. So if we look at this one, so this is the Acropolis, and this is, if you've never seen, it's kind of big rock. You've got the old Greek Acropolis on top. It's in Athens. And you've got kind of this structure and a couple of other structures. So it's quite a nice generation because you can set it up in a clean way. And we heard GLM here. This is Sonnet 4.6. Like it's almost good, like except for the roof, but actually quite impressive generation. We have the Gemini 3 Pro here, kind of boring, but quality is very high. So I do kind of like that, but it's a little too tidy, I would say, versus what it should be. But nevertheless, very good generation. Opus 4.6, this was a shame about the roof, but otherwise, this is like one of my favorite generations. It has different trees here, different people, structures put together quite nicely. So I thought that was like really, really nice generation. 5.4 here is like a little bit boring. Like, why would you like arrange people like that? It's kind of not that inspiring, but and the background is a little bit boring, but honestly not too bad. So like close a little bit towards the Gemini kind of quality. Opus 4.5 here as well, where we've got the kind of, again, a little bit boring, but not too bad. Maybe this one is a nicer Opus 4.5, Opus 4.6 thinking, so that's maybe a little bit too tidy, but again, like Opus 4.6 seems to be doing a particularly good job in this kind of tests. And then we have Opus 4.7. Now you've seen what the good generations look like, and I don't even know that, like, all the sizing is completely wrong. People I guess are like arranged in different ways. It's very boring. There's like not much going on, like different structures not arranged and so on. Look, you might tell me like, okay, maybe we've got we should have used like extra high thinking, maybe. Right, I'm not using the super high thinking here, and in fact, most of the generations here were non-thinking just for the speed of testing. And in fact, this is actually, speaking of which, this is the thinking one. So this is the high thinking one, and it looks pretty much the same as the non-thinking 4.7. So what's going on there? I really like this kind of makes it pretty weird, right? And you look at some of these ones, especially this generation we had from Opus 4.6, and then the generation from Opus 4.7, like you saw, this is not cherry picked, right? So I have two generations. So I have three generations from 4.7. Two of them look the same, and they are like thinking and non-thinking, pretty much. They kind of both look terrible. This one is like not too bad. I mean, this is like maybe some innovation in the architecture there, but the quality is kind of odd. So I'd be curious to hear if you guys experience similar kind of thing. I must say I've also tried the Acropolis prompt in Claude Code directly just to see if there's anything like particularly weird. And I pretty much had literally this kind of generation. So there's not like an obvious error, I don't think, but it seems to be just we are not getting this kind of quality jump that at least I can see. So I'd be curious to see what you guys think. If you go in the Arena now, you definitely get quite a lot of goes at Opus, especially in the battle mode right now. You can get a lot of good generations there. So I'd really encourage you to try it out and see what you think, whether you use it on Arena, which I think is a really nice to get a kind of side-by-side view, or anywhere else.